Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we got a great show for you with my co-host, David Null, Hawkeye Two Feathers. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you as always, and we greet all of you with the love and the honor of the infinite creator. And of course, we always hope that you're doing as well as possible. And we thank you for coming and hanging out with us. And we got an interesting story tonight, so hang out with us.
Absolutely, yeah. Don't want to miss that story. I like it. Anyway, I want a big shout out to everybody who's joining us early here. Thank you for being here. We got Scotty Boy first in chat. Yeah, I don't have the little applause. Sorry. Off the hook. Aloha, Elderberry. How you doing out there? You got your garden growing and you got the chickens doing good. I'm planting my garden too. We got a garden show coming up this Saturday. Will be garden show. So if you want to send me some pictures of your garden, I'll put them up on the thing so everybody can see and you can tell us what you're growing. If you don't want to come on or you want to come on, you can. And I'll just email me. I'll send you a link. And we're going to talk about gardening and vegetables and, things like that. Because, hey, it's that time of the year. And if you ain't planting something, well, you ain't growing anything then. Anyway. Let's see. F Kitty's in the house. Let's see. Bridget O'Higgins. Hello and good evening. Yes. There we go. And there we go. Off the hook says, good to see you, Hawkeye. Anyway, okay. Tonight we're going to be talking about this guy right here, John Giles. And John Giles lived long ago. And I was going through this really old book that I got that was, it's called Events in Indian History. And as I was paging through this book, you're probably going to say, well, where did you get that book? Well, it's an old book. And it's got old pictures in it, and fold-outs and stuff. So this is quite the thing. This book was printed in 1841. So quite the thing. Very old. It's called Events in Indian History, the origin of the American Indians and early settlements in North America. With narratives and the captivities, the principal chiefs and head sechems of different Indian tribes, their biographies. And I thought, well, this has got to be a good book. So, I search out old Indian books just so I can bring them all to you. And as I was going through here, I come across one that was called The Captivity of John Giles. Well, and I started reading it. It sounded really interesting. John Giles was a young man. His family came here from England, and they settled in the New York area. And of course, I got some kind of pictures though, so I am not going to disappoint. There we go. I got to hear all this and present. Of course, I can present. It says, and you're not seeing the picture. Well, anyway, I hope you all enjoy this because this is kind of a neat one. And then if you don't like gory, well, cover your ears when we get to the thing about the goriness. Anyway, this is the Connecticut colony. It's in Connecticut, Long Island, New York area, New Jersey, New York. And this is where they would have settled it, back in the day. And you can see here parts of Massachusetts in 1658, 1665. But we're going to advance all the way to 1668 when the wilderness was still wild. And you can see Connecticut survey line 1695. Like says this was all land granted to entrepreneurs from the king or whatever, And there's Richard Red. Hello and welcome. So there we go. Let's see. Connecticut also claimed lands west of the Delaware River based on the 1662 Sea to Sea Charter. Remember, none of these states were formed yet. They were just territory colonies. People would come over here by ship. New York was a good port for the ships. And this is what it would probably look like back in the day. Probably the houses weren't in form and line, but hey, looks kind of modern day houses, only smaller, big ships, little ships. It was a seaport, a fishing area. And here you can see all this is a modern day map. This is established in 1788, New York. Anyway, this is just kind of giving you a general area of the rivers that ran into this kind of inlet here. And because of this Long Island Sound and these other little areas, this made great sailing for ships because they were kind of protected by the land from the sea. And once you got in here, you were kind of safe. Okay, so we're gonna skip ahead to.
You were really safe.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the seas could be very brutal. And this is the Ordeal of John Giles. Now, this is a book, but this is not the book. He was a slave, of course, of the Maliseets. I guess that's it. Some kind of Indian tribe, the Maliseets. One tribe I've never heard of, so I guess we'll have to go with that. Okay, he was born in Pemaquid, Maine, around 1680. His father, the Puritan John Giles, entered the New Brunswicks as a famous boy captive of the Maliseets of the St. John's River. He later became an interpreter, a military officer, and author of memoirs of odd adventures, strange deliverances, etc. The Captivity of John Giles in 1736. Of course, when you're captured, you live through it, you write a book about it, even back in the day. There, maybe you guys can see it better. So anyway, he was captured by the Maliseet raiding party in 1689 and brought from Maine to what is now New Brunswick, made a slave of the Maliseets for 6 years, and eventually sold to a French family on the St. John River, with whom he lived for 3 years until 1698. And in the process, he was one of the first English residents to live in the province and undoubtedly the first observed Stuart Truman to have an intimate knowledge of the culture, language, and habits of the English and Maliseet and French societies. His value as a translator and interpreter came from the unique experience which he purportedly recorded in his personal journal, which he published as memoirs of odd adventures in 1736. Well, we've talked about this many times before, how you are really an important person if you could understand the languages. And as we know and studied some of these guys could speak, multiple languages. And as an interpreter, they were invaluable. Even Lewis and Clark, they hired Indian interpreters. Anybody that could interpret it. Sacagawea was an interpreter. That's, a big reason. She was young. She couldn't really do anything, but she was an interpreter. Okay.
Yeah, and they were literally invaluable. You couldn't put a price tag on it, because if you couldn't understand another language and you were seriously in trouble or needed to communicate, they literally were invaluable.
Yes, absolutely. Otherwise it was just hand signals and gestures and so forth and so on. But how did he survive? What was the ordeal? And as I dug into the reading on this, I was really shocked. And we're going to read some of this too, because I don't even know how, this guy survived. I mean, it's just unimaginable. The first year, and this is his abduction. This is what happened when the Indians raided your farm or your fort or whatever it was. It came unexpectedly. You know, you'd be out in the field and you know, all of a sudden there's an Indian and he's trying to shoot and kill you and take your scalp or take your children or whatever. I mean, how scary could that be? I mean, we today in this age, we can't even comprehend that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just unthinkable. So how do I want to put this? It's really hard, but it's going to get gory. Put it that way. On the 2nd day of August, 1689, in the morning, my honored father, Thomas Giles, Esquire, went with some laborers, my 2 elder brothers and myself, to one of his farms, which laid upon the river, about 3 miles above Fort Charles, adjoining the Pemaquid Falls, there to gather in his English harvest. And they keep saying this English harvest, and I just don't get it. I don't know if you understand. David, you got any insight into this English harvest? Let me know. And we labored securely till noon. After we had dined, our people went to their labor, some in one field to their English hay, and others to another field of English corn. My father, the youngest of my 2 brothers, and myself tarried near the farmhouse, in which we had dined till about 1 o'clock, at which time we heard a report of several great guns. And a report is shots fired. Guns at the fort, upon which my father said he hoped it was a signal of good news, and that the Great Council had sent back soldiers to cover the inhabitants. For on the report of the revolution, they had deserted. But to our great surprise, about 30 or 40 Indians at that moment discharged a volley of shot at us from behind a rising ground near our barn. The yelling of the Indians and the whistling of their shot and the voice of my father, whom I heard cry out, "Now what? Now, what now?" so terrified me, though he seemed to be handling a gun, that I endeavored to make my escape. My brother ran one way and I another. Looking over my shoulder, I saw a stout fellow, painted, pursuing me with a gun and a cutlass glittering in his hand. I remember that they had one shot, and then after that, they had to stick you with the sword, right? Which I expected every moment in my brains. I soon fell down, and the Indian seized me by my left hand. I offered no abuse, but he tied my arms, then lifted me up and pointed to a place where the people were at work about the hay, led me that way. As we went, we crossed where my father was, who looked very pale and bloody, and walked very slowly. When we came to the place, I saw 2 men shot down on the flats, and 1 or 2 more knocked on their heads with hatchets, crying out, "Oh Lord!" and more, I guess, and C. I don't know what and C is, but I can imagine it's probably cuss words, because that's what I would say if I got hatcheted in the head. There the Indians brought 2 captives, one a man and my brother James, who with me had endeavored to escape by running from the house where we were first attacked. This brother was about 14 years of age. My oldest brother, whose name was Thomas, wonderfully escaped by land to the Barbican, a point of land on the west side of the river, opposite of the fort, where several fishing vessels lay. He got on board one of them and sailed that night. After doing what mischief they could, they sat down and made us sit with them. After some time, we arose, and the Indians pointed for us to go eastward. We marched about a quarter of a mile and then made a halt. Here, they brought my father to us. They made proposals to him by old Moxus. I don't know who Moxus is. He might have been some kind of a chief, I would assume, who told him that those were strange Indians who shot him and that he was sorry for it. My father replied that he was a dying man and he wanted no favor of them, but to pray with his children. This being granted him, he recommended us to the protection and blessing of God Almighty, then gave us the best advice and took his leave for this life, hoping in God that we should meet in a better. He parted with a cheerful voice, but looked very pale, by reason of his great loss of blood, which now gushed out of his shoes. The Indians led him aside. I heard blows of the hatchet, but neither shriek nor groan. Afterwards, heard that he had 5 or 7 shot holes through his waistcoat or jacket, and then he was covered with some boughs, which are browse or whatever, like branches of a tree. The Indians led us, their captives, on the east side of the river towards the fort. When we came within a mile and a half of the fort and town and could see the fort, we saw firing and smoke on all sides. Here we made a short stop and then moved within a near the distance of 3/4 of a mile from the fort into a thick swamp. There I saw my mother and my 2 little sisters and many other captives who were taken from the town. My mother asked me about my father. I told her he was killed, but could not say more for grief. She burst into tears, and the Indians moved me a little farther off and seized me with cords to a tree. Can you imagine being a little kid? Now, his older brother was 14, and so that, I imagine he must have been like 9 or 10, I would say. Don't you think?
My guess was 10, but
yeah, somewhere in that age range. But to, I mean, kids nowadays would just be traumatized. They'd be crying and bawling, watching their dad die. He's bleeding out. He's bleeding so bad it's coming out of his shoes. That's talk about losing blood. And the mother, and the Indians tying him up and making him march. And I mean, like I said, people nowadays would just not know what to, they couldn't handle this.
they would be too traumatized.
They would in like a minute. I swear that people nowadays, this would happen. They would just lay down on the ground and they get traumatized when Trump got elected. They couldn't function, and that was just an election. Can you imagine what would happen if something like this happened? They would just lay down. Oh, kill me! I don't care.
Well, though, there are things like that going on in Africa, though.
Yeah,
With some of the tribes in quote the deep jungle and places, there are some ferocious things going on today that resemble what happened back then. So in a lot of ways, the overall society of the planet hasn't really changed too much. It's just slowed down. We're not all that vicious, but there is still viciousness going on.
yeah, but here in the States, we're not that kind of strong people. I mean, maybe in other countries where life is already hard, I mean, look at this guy. This kid, he's like 10, I think we'll settle on 10. And they watch him take his dad out, a little ways, and then they hear the chops of the axe in his head. And it's like, oh, they're killing my dad, what the fudge?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, well, let's move on with this. It gets better. The Indians came to New Harbor and sent spies several days to observe how and where the people were employed, and more. Who found the men were generally at work at noon and left about their houses, only women and children. Therefore, the Indians divided themselves into several parties, some ambushing the way between the fort and the houses, as likewise between them and the distant. See, and here's the thing too. They're just spying on people. People are going about their own ways. They're growing their gardens. They're out tilling the fields or whatever, and they're watching them and going, yeah, we'll just take our time, we'll get their pattern, because people make patterns, don't they? You get up usually at the same time, you go to get the mail, I mean, if somebody would watch you for a little while, they would just be like, yeah, it's about 9 o'clock and it's time for him to go get the mail.
Well, especially if it's the military. So, they might have had a bugler, to sound, revelry for early, get, morning muster, and then there might have been something at lunchtime or something. So, but besides that, women always come up with, well, it's lunchtime at 10 o'clock. I got to get things ready for lunch. And later on in the evening, they got to go out and get wood or whatever, So, yeah, they absolutely had patterns.
Yep. Oh, yeah, that's for sure. Okay, the Indians came to New Harbor and sent spy. Oh, we did that. Okay. Several parties came ambushing the way between the fort and houses, as likewise between them and the distant field. And then, alarming the furthest off first, they killed and took the people as they moved towards the town and fort at their pleasure, and very few escaped to it. Mr. Patesall was taken and killed as he lay with his sloop near the Barbican. Sloop or slope, S-L-O-O-P. What the heck is that? Lay with his slope, S-L-O-O-P. I don't know what a slope is. Do you?
No, not offhand.
Killed as he lay with his slope. I don't know. If anybody knows what a slope is, let me know. On our first story about the fort, my youngest brother was at play near it, and running in was, by God's goodness, thus preserved. Captain Weems, I guess that's Weems, with great courage and resolution, defended the weak old fort for 2 days. When being much wounded and the best of his men killed, he beat for a parley, which evaluated in these conditions. Now, if you don't know what a parley is, go watch Pirates of the Caribbean, and it's where the two chiefs come together and they strike some kind of a deal. So I imagine most of the guys were getting killed, and they just surrounded the fort and waited them out, and just kept shooting. The Indians had the advantage there. Just lob bullets and arrows until, they either run out or die, or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but consider that they didn't have an unlimited supply of shot and or gunpowder. So, but they would absolutely make the best of their ammunition.
Yeah, and when after shooting so much, you like, well, we're running out, man. Pretty soon we're going to be, defenseless, because that's how the white man fought, is with a gun, and the Indians fought with guns and arrows. So they opted for a parley. The conditions. Here's the condition: that the Indians should give him Mr. Patesall's sloop. I still don't know what a sloop is. That they should not molest him in carrying off the few people that had got into the fort and the 3 captives they had taken. That the English should carry off in their hands what they could from the fort. So basically, they're going to let them go. They're going to carry what they want, and the Indians are going to say, "Okay, great, go," and they'll give them back the 3 captive Indians that they've taken.
So they're going to abandon the fort.
Yes, they're going to abandon the fort now.
Okay.
And, anyway, and this is after several days of fort for 2 days. They've been basically fighting for 2 days. I guess, can you imagine the gunshots going off for 2 days? I mean, that's enough to give anybody what is it, PSTD or whatever it is?
PTSD.
PTSD, that's it. Okay, on these conditions, the fort was surrendered, and Captain Weems went off. And soon after, the Indians set on fire the fort and houses, which made a terrible blast, and was a melancholy sight to us poor captives, who were sad spectators. After the Indians had thus laid waste Pemaquid, they moved us to New Harbor, about 2 miles east of Pemaquid. I hope I'm saying that right. A cove much frequented by fishermen. At this place, there were, before the war, about 12 houses. These the inhabitants deserted as soon as the rumor of war reached the place. When we turned our backs on the town, my heart was ready to break. I saw my mother. She spoke to me, but I could not answer her. That night, we tarried at New Harbor. I imagine tarried is like waited or rested. I don't know. They use these terms, and I didn't have time to look up the meaning of all these weird words.
Did you say Terry?
Tarried, Tarri.
Yeah, but yeah, they yeah, loitered.
Loitered. Okay, that'd be another. I gotta get me a big dictionary. Put it that way. And the next day, they went in their canoes to Penobscot about noon. The canoe in which my mother was and that in which I was came side by side. Whether accidentally or by my mother's desire, I cannot say. She asked me how I did. I think I said pretty well. My heart was so full of grief, I scarcely knew whether audible to her. Then she said, "Oh, my child, how joyful and pleasant it would be if we were going to Old England to see your Uncle Chalker and other friends there. Poor babe, we are going into the wilderness, the Lord knows where." Then, bursting into tears, the canoes parted. That night following, the Indians with their captives lodged on an island. A few days after, we arrived at Penobscot Fort, where I again saw my mother, my brother, and sisters, and many other captives. I think we tarried here 8 days. In that time, the Jesuit of the place had a great mind to buy me. My Indian master made a visit to the Jesuit and carried me with him. And here I will note that the Indian who takes a captive is accounted his witness and has a to him until he gives or sells him to another. I saw a Jesuit show my master pieces of gold, and I understood afterwards that he was tendering them for my ransom. He gave me a biscuit, which I put into my pocket, and not daring to eat it, buried it under a log, fearing he had put something into it, make me love him. Being very young and having heard much of the Baptists torturing Protestants, caused me to act, or the Papalists, the church guys. I don't even know how to say that. What do you call that? A Papalist, torturing the Protestants, causing me to act thus, and I hated the sight of a Jesuit. When my mother heard the talk of me being sold to a Jesuit, she said to me, "Oh, my dear child, if it were God's will, I had rather follow you to the grave or never see you more in this world than you should be sold to a Jesuit. For a Jesuit will ruin you, body and soul." It pleased God to grant her request, for she never saw me more. Yet she and my 2 little sisters were, after several years in captivity, redeemed. But she died before I returned. My brother, who was taken with me, was several years' captivity, most barbarously tortured to death by the Indians. Death and torture. That's what they did. Man. Oh, talk about, I mean, when you're captured like that, and there's your mother, and then you're never going to see her again, and you're like 10 years old, and you're watching them torture people. I don't even, and you're a slave. And when you're a slave there and you can't understand the language, I can't imagine what is going through your head.
Well, also the fact that they hated the Jesuits at that time.
Yeah, that was another thing too. Exactly. Why did they hate the Jesuits so much? I don't understand it.
Because the Jesuits were conniving, and they'd whisper in the chief's ear, and these people are no good, and they were instigators to the nth degree. And to think that there's a Jesuit supposed to be ahead of the Catholic Church now is an affrontal to the original Catholic Church. But anyway, so yeah, even Lincoln said in one of his letters during the Civil War, he said, if it hadn't have been for the Jesuits, there may not have been a Civil War.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I agree. Oh, okay. Let's see.
Well, and to think about, here's supposed to be a person who's representing a Christian church and is buying you as a slave.
Yeah.
I mean, just what? You know.
Aren't you supposed to be preaching the good book of like, oh, let them, and why didn't the Indians kill the Jesuit guys off? Was there some kind of magical power over the Indians there? It makes you wonder.
In a way, I think they had some kind of something on them. And but now there were a bunch of Jesuits that got hung, crucified, and otherwise murdered by the Indians. It's not like they they got away scot-free by any stretch of the imagination. But the some of them, they had figured out some kind of inroad.
They did
with the Indians, and I think that it had something to do with, I am an emissary from God. I am from your great spirit, and you can't kill me because you would greatly offend your creator. Now you know me, and I'm on your side, so that means you're in favor of the creator when I'm around you. Those folks over there, no, I'm not in favor with them, so neither are they in favor with God.
I like understand? That interpretation. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I got to remember that one. Getting a pinch. I mean, talk your way out of the natives. Yeah.
But see, I mean, from a psychologist's point of view, that would be how you'd get in there. I mean, and finagle them around certain things, and think of all the years of practice the Jesuits had in the European countryside, sort of thing, to where they had, they finagled kings and queens and prince and princesses, and so they had a lot of practice in how they could use an MK Ultra on them.
Yeah.
Papist meant for the Pope.
Papist meant.
Yeah. So there was some ongoing Protestant Papist conflict still going. Yeah.
Huh, yeah.
Back in those days, I mean, it was back in the day as Martin Luther and proclamations on the church wall, the door thing. And, and I mean, back in those days, the Catholics hated Protestants and vice versa,
Oh, man.
I mean, hate.
Yeah. See, I see this. I just don't get it all. It's like they're just people. It's just you believe in something different, and your religion's all really close together anyway. So what the heck? I don't know. Anyway, let's get on with this. It gets interesting here. How his Indian master has him. He's a slave and he knows it. My Indian master carried me up Penobscot River to a village called Manawakamani, which stands on a point of land between the main river and a branch which heads to the east of it. At home, I had ever seen strangers treated with the utmost civility, and being a stranger, I expected some kind of treatment here. But I soon found myself deceived, for I presently saw a number of squaws who had got together in a circle, dancing and yelling. At an old grim-looking one took me by the hand and leading me into the ring. Some seized me by my hair and others by my hands and feet, like so many furies. But my master, presently laying down a pledge, they released me. A captive among the Indians is exposed to all manners of abuses and to the extreme most tortures, unless their master or some of their master's relations laid down a ransom. This I thought was really interesting, such as a bag of corn, a blanket, or which redeems which redeems them from their cruelty for that dance. The next day we went up the eastern branch of the Penobscot River, many leagues, carried over land to a large pond, and from one pond to another, till in a few days we went down a river called the Minadoctac, which vents itself into the St. John's River. But before we came to the mouth of this river, we passed over a long carrying place to Minadoctac Fort, which stands on the bank of St. John's River. My master went before and left me with an old Indian and 2 or 3 squaws. The old man often said, which was all the English he could speak, "By and by come to a great town and fort." That's the only words he could speak. I now confronted myself in thinking how finally I should be refreshed when I came to this great town. After some miles travel, we came in sight of a large cornfield, and soon after of the fort. To my great surprise, 2 or 3 squaws met us, took off my pack, and led me to a large hut or wigwam, where 30 or 40 Indians were dancing and yelling round 5 or 6 poor captives who had been taken by some months before from Quonachek at the Major Waldron, who was barbarously butchered by them. Sorry, I can't pronounce some of those names, but hey, they're confusing. I was whirled in among this circle of Indians, and we prisoners looked at each other with a sorrowful countenance. Presently, one of them was seized by each hand and foot by 4 Indians, who, swinging him up, let his back fall on the ground with full force. This they repeated till they had danced, as they called it, around the whole wigwam, which was 30 or 40 feet in length. But when they tortured a boy, they take him up between 2. This is one of their customs of torturing captives. Another is to take up a person by the middle, with his head hanging downwards, and jolt him around till one would think his bowels would shake out of his mouth. Sometimes they will take a captive by the hair of his head, and stooping him forward, strike him on the back of the shoulders till the blood gushes out of his mouth and nose. Told you people it's going to be gory. Sometimes an old shriveled squaw will take up a shovel of hot embers and throw them into the captive's bosom. If he cries out, the Indians will laugh and shout and say, "What a brave action our old grandmother has done." Sometimes they torture them with whips and more. The Indians looked on me with a fierce countenance, as to say it was be your turn next. They clamped cornstalks, which they threw into my hat as I held it in my hand. I smiled on them, though my heart ached. I looked at one and another, but could not perceive that any eye pied me. Presently came a squaw and a little girl, and laid down a bag of corn in the ring. The little girl took me by the hand, making signs for me to go out of the circle with them. Not knowing their custom, I suppose they designed to kill me, and I refused to go. Then a grave Indian came and gave me a short pipe, and said in English, "Smoke it." Then he took me by the hand and led me out. My heart ached, thinking myself near my end. but he carried me to a French hut about a mile from the Indian fort. The Frenchman was not at home, but his wife, who was a squaw, had some discourse with my Indian friend, which I did not understand. We tarried about 2 hours, then returned to the Indian village, where they gave me some victuals. I imagine that's food. Not long after this, I saw one of my fellow captives, who gave me a melancholy account of their sufferings after I left them. After some weeks had passed, we left this village, went up to St. John's River, about 10 miles, to a branch called Menadoc Sinsicas. I don't even know how to pronounce that, but where I even put that, I Googled that one and it came up with nothing. Where there was one wigwam. At our arrival, an old squaw saluted me with a yell, taking me by the hair in one hand. But I was so rude as to break her hold and free myself. She gave me a filthy grin, and the Indians set up a laugh, and so it passed over. We lived upon fish, wild grapes, roots, and more, which was a hard living to me. When winter came on, we went up the river till the ice came down, running thick in the river. When, according to the Indian custom, we'd laid up our canoes till spring. Then we traveled sometimes on the ice and sometimes on land, till we came to a river that was open but not fordable, where we made a raft and passed over, bag and baggage. I met with no abuse from them in this winter's hunting, though I was put to great hardship in carrying burdens and for want of food. But they underwent the same difficulty, and I would often encourage myself, saying in broken English, by and by, great deal moose. Yet they could not answer any question I asked them, and knowing little of their customs and way of life, I thought it tedious to be constantly moving from place to place, though it might be in some respects an advantage. For it ran still in my mind that we were traveling to some settlement, and when my burden was over heavy, the Indians left me behind, and the still evening coming on, I fancied I could see through the bushes and hear the people of some great town, which hope thought some support to me in the day, yet I found not the town at night. So here he is. They're not feeding him much. He's doing a lot of work. And then, and what I get out of this, they're constantly moving from place to place. And I can't figure out if they're like, they're just vagrants, or is that what all these Indians were doing, just moving from place to place? Like, we talk about them being, what do you call it? Hunter gatherers, but
nomads.
Yeah, nomads. That's the word.
Didn't it say that in the wintertime they followed the ice and open to the open water? I'm sure that whatever it was, that game was scarce and they were moving because of the seasons.
Yes.
They were migrating just like the, deer and other animals migrate. I'm sure they were migrating.
Yep. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. They were looking,
because they had to. They'd starve to death if they stayed where they were.
Yeah.
So I believe they were migrating, to stay with the game or fishing. Because in different places the ice moves in, the fish move out. They're looking for, some fish want warmer waters. So
Yeah.
Scotty Boy says following the food. Yep.
Yeah, it's sort of a railroad of captives in addition to nomadic life. Yeah, I get that. That's right. Nowhere is safe. Okay, let's go on. Thus we were hunting 300 miles from the sea and knew no man within 50 or 60 miles of us. We were 8 or 10 in number and had about 2 guns on which we wholly depended on for food. If any disaster had happened, we might all have perished. Sometimes we had no manner of sustenance for 3 or 4 days, but God wonderfully provided for all creatures. In one of these fasts, God provided, God's providence was remarkable. Our two Indian men who had guns in hunting startled a moose, but there being a shallow, crusted snow on the ground, and the moose, discovering them, ran with great force into the swamp. Now remember, people, a moose is 1,200 pounds, and they can move fast. They have legs.
They are huge.
Yeah, they stand, probably 10 feet tall. So yeah, moose, they'll kill you. They're very dangerous. People die every year. They get killed by moose. Yet, they look really tame and docile until you walk up to them, and then they'll stomp you.
Bullwinkle was a murderer.
Right. The Indians went around the swamp and, finding no track, returned at night to the wigwam and told what had happened. The next morning, they followed him on the track and soon found him lying on the snow. He had, in crossing the roots of a large tree that had been blown down, broken through the ice, made over the water in the hole, occasioned by the roots of the tree taking up the ground, and hitched one of his hind legs among the roots so fast that by striving to get it out, he pulled his thigh bone out of its socket at the hip, and thus extraordinarily were we provided for in our great strait. Sometimes they would take a bear, which goes into the dens in the fall of the year without any sort of food, and lie there for 4 or 5 months because they're hibernating, without food, never going out till spring, in which time they neither lose nor gain in flesh. If they went into their dens fat, they came out so, and if they went in lean, they came out lean. I've seen some which have come out with 4 whelps, and both very fat, and then we feasted. An old squaw and a captive, if any present, must stand without the wigwam, meaning you're standing outside without the wigwam, shaking their hands and bodies as in a dance and singing, "We go ho, neo, whoa." I hope I said that right. Which in English is, "Fat is by eating." This is to signify their thankfulness in feasting times. When one supply was spent, we fasted till further success. So, with all of that, I was thinking, now I know why there was no fat Indians, because, hey, we got food today and we feast, and then when it's all gone, well, there's nothing to eat. You just wait till the next feast comes along, I mean, talk about fasting. You're fasting if you want to or not.
Yep, and it was something that they did often, especially if they were on the trail. If they were going hunting or something, the guys just took a little bit of jerky, and most of the time, they were at a slow trot, to get wherever they were going, and they could cover 10 miles easy, and probably in about the time it would take me to go 1 mile,
Oh yeah.
And it would be through thick jungle and brush, and sometimes they had trails, but most of the time they were making their own trails too. So
yeah, well, and that's the thing. The woods wasn't kept up like it is today. And he's already mentioned in here like 3 or 4 times now about fasting and not having any food to eat. And we would have perished if we didn't find something soon, And it's winter. And it's winter, when it's winter here, I'm making pies and eating banana bread and feasting like no other. I gain weight in the winter and because I sit around and do nothing. Them guys back then, they're out there tromping through the snow trying to find their next meal in the winter and saying how hungry I am and it's really cold. Oh boy. Off the Hook says I'll stick to camping in Hawaii. I like that.
And to think that they a lot of times they were sleeping out in the open. They had a little campfire and they'd just lay down and cover up in this, and it's And if you've ever camped out in the open, I mean, even down here in the South, you'll wake up wet. Your blanket's going to be wet.
Yeah.
Now, I have not camped out west. Well, I have, but not like out in the desert, so I don't really know. But the moisture will come out of the air at night and land on you. The dew will fall on you,
Does
and
here?
you know your blanket's going to be wet. You
Yep.
know, so not only are you cold, but you wake up wet. You know.
You wake up wet. You're exactly
How
right.
is it up north where you're at? Does the dew fall the same way?
Yes, yes, it does.
Yeah. Okay. So you're gonna sleep out in the open. You're gonna wake up wet. There you go.
Yep, yep. I'm in
Sorry.
camp.
Go ahead.
Happens the same way. Okay, let's go on with this food thing. The way they preserve meat is by taking the flesh from the bones and drying it in smoke, by which it is kept sound months or years without salt. We moved still further up the country after moose when our store was out, so that by the spring we had to go out to the northward of the Lady Mountains. When the spring came,
And a
and
store meant that was their store of food.
yeah,
By the way.
yeah, well, there's 10 of them eating on a moose. It goes pretty fast.
Right. But when they talk about a store, that means anything they might have stored up. So, but anyway.
Yes. Oh, yeah. When the spring came and the rivers broke up, we moved back to the head of St. John's River, and there made canoes of moose hides, sewing 3 or 4 together and pitching the seams with balsam mixed with charcoal. When we went down to the river to a place called Madawaxcook, there an old man lived and kept a sort of trading house where we tarried several days. Then we went farther down the river till we came to the greatest falls in these parts, called the Chickacon-Capapeg, where we carried a little way over the land, meaning portage, and putting off our canoes, we went downstream still. And as we passed down by the mouths of any large branches, we saw Indians. But when they danced, any dance was proposed, I was brought off. At length we arrived at the place where we left our birch canoes in the fall, and putting our baggage into them, we went down to the fort. There we planted corn, and after planting, we went a fishing and to look for and dig roots till the corn was fit to weed. After weeding, we took a second tour on the same errand, then returned to our hill to hill our corn. After hilling, we went some distance from the fort and field up the river to take salmon and other fish, which we dried for food, where we continued to till corn and was filled with milk. Meaning the corn was probably right. Some of it we dried, then other as it ripened. To dry corn, when in the milk, they gather it in large kettles and boil it on the ears till it is pretty hard. Then they shell it from the cob with clam shells and dry it on bark in the sun. When it is thoroughly dry, a kernel is no bigger than a pea and would keep for years. When it is boiled again, it swells as large as when it was on the ear and tastes comparably sweeter than other corn. When we had gathered our corn and dried it in the way I already described, we put some into Indian barns, that is, into holes into the ground, lined and covered with bark, and then with dirt. The rest we carried up the river upon our next winter's hunting. Thus God wonderfully favored me and carried me through the first year of my captivity. And that was the first year. He was there for 6 years.
So what they did with that corn was they made what we call today the survivalist is a cache of corn. You know, so and here's the thing, they knew it. So we're going to put some here, but we'll be back to winter, you know. So these folks, you know, they weren't stupid by a long shot. You know, they prepared as much as they possibly could. and they knew from year to year how much corn they needed to put up in their in that hole in the ground, or that cache. And that hole in the ground, think of it in terms of like being a storm, not a storm shelter, but a root cellar.
Yeah. Let's see. F. Kitty says, remember, they had to carry their food and stuff with them. Yeah. So that's why they had the slave and said, "Here, you carry." I'm not doing that hard work.
And at that time, they didn't have a lot of horses on the East Coast yet.
No, they didn't. Besides that, the woods was thick, and it wasn't like the Great Plains where you just turn the horse out and let it graze all winter, all summer, whatever. There's grass all the time. Back there was, lots of trees and forests, and if you got a forest, you don't have the grassland for the horses.
And up in the New England area, it's rocky too. There are some mountains there, not like the Rocky Mountains out on the West Coast, but you still got stuff to climb over.
Exactly. Okay, here we go. There we planted the corn, and after we went fishing we did that part. Okay, and that was the first year it was kept. Then we go back to. So we're looking at what river was that? The St. John River. I hope it's on this one here. Maybe it's on the next one. It's the Shep, the Hartford, the Connecticut, the Hudson River, and it's not even on these places. Where the heck is it? It's got the. But anyway, I don't know where it is, but it goes on. It's quite the thing. And the next part of it goes, and that's the only part I could find in print that I could share. He goes on, and you guys can look up the book. It's called The Captivity of John Giles. It's kind of interesting, but I'm going to read you the second part of the second chapter, just a little bit of this paragraph. And in this second chapter, it's of the abuse and barbarous treatment which several captives met with from the Indians. When any great number of Indians met, or when any captives had been lately taken, or when any captives desert, now remember, you don't want to be deserted, and are retaken, they have a dance and torture the unhappy people with whom have fallen into their hands. My unfortunate brother, who was taken with me about 3 years, follow this, who had been taken with me from Casco Bay and was retaken by the Indians at New Harbor and carried back to Prescott Fort. Here they were both tortured at a stake by fire for some time. Then their noses, remember this is his brother, and their noses and ears were cut off, and they were made to eat them. After they were burnt to death at the stake, the Indians at the same time declaring that they would serve all deserters in the same manner. Thus they diverted themselves in their dances. Can you imagine? There's my brother, and they're burning him. They chopped off his nose and his ears, and they made you eat your nose and ears, and then they killed you. And they burnt you at the stake. I mean, oh my gosh, here. I mean, can you imagine somebody chopping off your nose? And I'm sure they didn't do it nicely. Like, here, I'm gonna slice it off real good for you. Oh, on the second spring of the year, my captivity, my Indian master and his squaw went to Canada. They really get around, but sent me down the river with several Indians to a fort to plant corn. The day before we came to a planting ground, we met 2 young Indian men who seemed to be a great haste. After they had passed us, I understood that where they were going, then expressed to Canada, and that there was an English vessel at the mouth of the river. I, not being perfect in their language, nor knowing that English vessels traded with them in time of war, supposed peace was concluded on, and that the captives would be released. I was so transported to this fancy, and I slept but little, if any, that night. Early the next morning, we came to a village where my ecstasy ended, for I had no sooner landed, but 3 or 4 Indians dragged me to a great wigwam where they were yelling and dancing. Brown, James Alexander, a Jersey man who had taken from Falmouth in Casco Bay. This was occasioned by 2 families of Cape Sable Indians who had, having lost some friends by a number of English fishermen, came some hundreds of miles to revenge themselves on poor captives. They soon came to me and tossed me about till I was almost breathless, and then threw me into the ring to my fellow captive, and taking him out, repeated their barbarics on him. Then I was hauled out again by 3 Indians, who seized me by the hair of my head, and bending me down on my hair, one beat me on the back and shoulders so long that the breath was almost beaten out of my body. Then the others put a tomahawk into my hands and ordered me to get up and sing and dance Indian, which I performed with the greatest reluctance, and while in the act seemed determined to purchase my death by killing 2 or 3 of those monsters of cruelty, thinking it impossible to survive their bloody treatment. But it was impressed on my mind that it was not in their power to take away my life, so I desisted. Those Cape Sable Indians came to me again like bears, bereaved of their whelps, yelling, "Shall we do? What shall we do? Who have lost their relations by the English? Suffer an English voice to be heard among us." They beat me again with the axe. Now I repented, and I had not sent 2 or 3 of them out of the world before me, for I thought I had much rather die than suffer any longer. They left me the second time, and the other Indians put the tomahawk in my hands again and compelled me to sing. Then it seemed more resolute than before to destroy some of them. I can imagine he was really angry at this point. But a strange and strong impulse that I should return to my own place and my own people suppressed it as often as such emotion rose to my breast. Not one of them showed the least compassion, but I saw the tears run down plentiful on the cheeks of a Frenchman who sat behind, though it did not alleviate the tortures that poor James and I were forced to endure for the most part of this tedious day, for they were continued till the evening, and were the most severe I had ever met with in those whole 6 years that I was captive with the Indians. And I'm going to stop right there because, like I said, so I'm listening to these stories. I'm just trying to get with the idea of, so it's kind of funny if you really look at it. If you're an Indian and you're there and somebody is just, a fisherman, he's strolling down his canoe and he just, look, an Indian, you know how it goes. Boom, look at that, we got one. Well, there's no retaliation for them. So they travel 100 miles to find some captives being held by somebody else, and then we'll just beat them and torture them because they killed one of our loved ones over here. So, we don't, the people don't think like that. You get what I'm saying? It's like, oh yeah, we can kill a few of these guys and we got away with it scot-free, but then they go and torture somebody else. So it's like you're torturing or killing somebody else. It's terrible, and after reading all of this, I just think, the cruelty of people. Can't we all get it in our heads to live in peace and live together? I mean, isn't that why we study this history, is so we don't repeat it?
Well, here's the thing. Back in those days, not that I wish to stand up for the native folk, but in that, they had thousands of years of this is how it is. And so from tribe to tribe, you had to dominate your enemy, you know? And so all the way through the Americas, all the way down into Peru and Argentina and all the way down, it seems like, for one tribe to, for whatever reason, conquer another tribe, that they do certain things. And I think the cruelty is that for us, it's cruelty, but for them, it's proven, aha, see, we're better than you, damn it. And and you're my captive, and I can treat you any way I want to. Ain't nobody gonna save you. And so they're talking to their other Indian buddies, and who might have had some mushrooms, by the way. And so they might be tripping a little bit, and they're talking back and forth. They go, "Yeah, let's see how much this white boy can stand," and they, throw him in the fire one more time or something, So it's like a big frat party in a way, and to see just how much, and you say, well, they tortured them. Yeah, well, that's what it was. Yeah, but if you look at it from their point of view, they're stating a point. We're better than, and and we can torture your butt, so that doesn't make it right, but that's about what they were thinking. The domineering and the taking of slaves, and the whole nine yards. So and if the man is sort of like you hear, the man is he's killed because he's the warrior, and so it could be, die a warrior's death and all that kind of stuff. So, but anyway, did it make it right? No. Did they do some cruel things? Yeah. But in their mind, it was like, we're celebrating.
Yeah. They're celebrating. And because, well, like I said, you're right, and, their relatives were killed, and it's their revenge. And yeah, I mean, I just think, I hope we learn something from all of this. That I know the way the world is talking. Oh, there's going to be a civil war, and there's going to be this, and we're going to do that, and let's try not to. Let's be peaceful. Let's learn from this stuff. Look what happens. Is this what kind of is this what you want? War? You want somebody you're out tending your garden, and a group of 40 men show up and start shooting at you and drag you by the hair and shoot your parents or your children and haul them off and leave you bleeding in a field? Or is this no, I don't. This is not my idea of a good time. You know what I mean, right?
Well, and and I live down here in the South, and there's still some Civil War stuff around down here, and so there's that history, and up above the Mason-Dixon line, and they didn't have the Southerners attack north of there, but there was a bunch of folks from Ohio and Pennsylvania that were attacking, Atlanta and Mobile and Macon and Savannah and all places in South Carolina. And, so down here in the South, the Northerners were all over the place, So the Southerners, in a way, feel still, a true Southerner, still feel the invasion, if you will. I mean, the Sherman's, march to Savannah kind of thing. I mean, he burned everything. And there are still, there's one town that he saved, and he just liked the place. And then from there on, he burned everything all the way to the ocean. And so that's cruel, and here within, the great Northerners, they walked into Southern plantations, took every bit of food from the people who lived here, all their livestock, all of their chickens, eggs, everything, and left nothing for the people who stayed behind. And that didn't happen up north.
Yeah.
But to the Southerners, it happened. and some of them are still kind of bitter about it. You know what I mean? But but to the point, the Southerners with our history, um, that their ancestors knew what it was like to be invaded.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
and how to lose everything.
Exactly.
And no, we do not want to do that again. The Northerners would not be so lucky.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I agree. I don't want to see it at all. I mean, it's just
Right.
I mean, after reading this, it's like I have to search out these books and these old books to read these stories, because this stuff would never be printed today. It would be so powder puffy, like, oh yeah, well, he got killed and they tortured him, and they probably say something like, oh, they scarred his face, not, they probably would just leave out the part where they chopped off his nose and his ears and made him eat them. That's stuff you hear about in these gory, grotesque books kind of thing. This is truly stuff that happened. It's crazy.
And when was that book was written? When?
1841. I think.
So see, that was well before the Great Indian Wars, and also before the Civil War. So here are things that have been recorded. Those types of things.
Yeah, this was going, like I said, this was he was living this and wrote about this in 1730 something.
Right.
It said so this was basically about 100 years later. They're reprinting this or recording this for us, which isn't really that long. I mean, it is, but it isn't. I mean, those people would, it'd be kind of he's given firsthand knowledge of this, and it's just being reprinted. Whereas nowadays, people, if you write something, they're going to twist it and turn it and make it politically correct. Everything is politically correct, and you lose words in translation and stuff.
So let me point out something too. What was the motivation for them to reprint this?
What, this story now or back then? Now.
Back then.
Oh,
so he wrote it first, and then they reprinted it, right?
Well, yeah, because this is a collection of Indian history, events in Indian history. So this is this is probably one of the printed, versions of this book in this.
Okay. My point to that is, it was a bunch of good stories, but they reprinted it also as propaganda, because in the 1840s and in that area just before the Civil War, they were still moving Indians out of here and putting them in Oklahoma. Folks were moving west, and so it became popular to write something like this, because the white folks then had an opinion about them savages.
Oh yeah,
you follow me?
I totally agree.
So in a way, it was the white man's way of, MK Ultra the population, and so so they got a bad opinion right off the bat. Here, read this book, and this is what they did to slaves, and this is how they did this to that, and so ooh, them bad Indians,
Yeah. Scotty Boy says swaying beliefs, exactly. And the narrative and the things like that. You're right. They put it out, and it's subtle propaganda, whereas years, I guess that's the only way you could do it. I mean, you didn't have like TV or radio that you could broadcast, right?
Absolutely, Afdi. It is a narrative, and it is a story, and it is true, because it was a firsthand. But it just, so printing it the first time is the story about The second time back in those days, they would have said, "Oh, that's a cool story, but them Indians, we need to reprint this."
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, what do you got for us tonight?
Well, we got us a story, and you've already got it queued up.
Yes, I do.
And the name of this story is A Man Chased by the Ancient of Lizards. Now, I'm still reading out of the Seneca Indian myths from Curtin, circa 1923. So for folks, it's like, well, this is, um, both of us like to reference books and stories that are, as far back in history as possible, because we have a tendency to get the true story. If you get a story that, somebody, it was retold in 1945, to me and to other folks, it's been retold several times. And now the person in 1945, he's or she is retelling a story that has been passed down. So there's the possibility that the story has been altered a little bit along the way. So to look at a story that was written back in them old days, we're more we feel that you're more susceptible to get the true story. So anyway, with that said, let me move things around a little bit here for y'all and for myself. The story is A Man Chased by the Ancient of Lizards. The characters in this story is Dagonoyant, Big Head. We've heard of him, he's Whirlwind. Next is Ogyenawan, Ganat or Nat. Swegadajiya, Hawk, actually Hen Hawk, that'd be the missus. Gazionditha, Meteor. We've had Meteor show up in other stories too. Next is Nagwaiha, the Ancient of Bears, and we've had them in stories before. Oshada, Mist or Dusty Vapor. And Jizianos Goa, Blue Lizard, the Ancient of Lizards. Once there was a large village where people lived happily and had plenty of meat. At the end of the village lived a man whom few persons noticed. One night, that man had a dream. His dream said, "Something is going to happen to the people of this village. You must tell them to move away within 10 days." The next morning, the man went to the center of the village, gathered the people, and told his dream. Some believed in the dream, others did not. 5 days later, those who had believed joined those who had not and paid no heed to the dream. The fifth night, the man dreamed again, and his dream said, "We know that people do not heed your warning, but save yourself. 3 days from now, take all your arrows and climb the hill on the east side of the village till you come to a large rock. The rock is hollow. Go inside of it and you will find a hole in the ground. Look through the hole and you will see all that is going on in the village. The people will be destroyed by Big Head. 5 days from now, At midday, there will be a terrible outcry. When the cry dies away, you must begin to shoot through the hole, for as soon as the people are destroyed, the monster will track you. You will save your life if you shoot all your arrows at it before it reaches the hole. When the monster is dead, take from the back of its head a piece of skin together with the hair, which is very long. The skin will be of use to you, for it has great power. Wind the hair around your body next to your skin and declare that there is nothing that you cannot do. At night, when it is dark enough not to be seen, go north a short distance and you will find a tree turned up by the roots. You must not be frightened. I shall give you something which will be of great use to you. After this dream, the man was gloomy and unhappy. When the time came, he took his bundle of arrows and left the village. He didn't take his wife or children, for they did not believe in the dream. Just at sunset, he came to a large rock on the side of the hill. He found the opening and going into it, crept along till he thought he was under the center of the rock. There he found a space high enough for him to stand in. He lay down and slept. The next morning, a deer was standing near the opening. He killed it, roasted some of the meat, and ate it. The fifth day, as the man sat on the rock, he heard a great noise coming from the south. As the sound approached the village, he saw something that looked like smoke, saw that trees were falling and falling toward the village. When the noise reached the village, the man took his position opposite the opening in the ground. It seemed to him that the village was right at hand. He heard the screaming of the people and saw the cabins torn to pieces and hurled into the air. Big Heg missed one man, and when all the others were destroyed, he laughed and said, "This world is not large enough for him to hide in." When the man saw that trees were falling toward the east, he knew that Big Head had found his trail, and he strung his bow and began to shoot through the hole as rapidly as possible. When only 2 arrows were left, he saw a great black head not far away. He shot his last arrow. The roar ceased. The head fell, and he heard it say, "You have killed me." The man went to where the head lay and found in it every arrow he had shot. "I must do as my dream said," thought he. So he took part of the scalp, tied it around his body, and said, "You must always help me. You must not let me be overpowered by anyone." He climbed to the top of the hill quickly, for now he could go very fast. He found a good place and built a brush hut. "I must have plenty of meat," thought he. On going out, he saw deer, bears, and all kinds of game. He killed what he wanted. To skin the deer and bears, he had merely to take hold of the skin of the head and pull. With no effort, the skin came from the whole carcass. He made a brush shed and hung the meat up to dry. When it began to grow dark, the man started toward the north, as his dream had told him to do. He had not gone far when he came to a fallen tree. The roots turned out of the ground. When halfway round the tree, he saw a meteor with his great mouth open. When Meteor saw that the man wasn't frightened, he laughed and said, "Take one of my teeth. It will be of great use to you. It will enable you to change yourself into any form you like." The man took a double tooth, the one farthest back in Meteor's jaw. Then Meteor said, "You will live always and you will have great power, but you and I must always counsel with each other. Now we will part." Meteor flew off through the air and the man went back to his hut. He made up his mind that the hut would be his home. He stayed there a long time. Then, getting lonesome, he said to himself, "I will go and see if I can find people anywhere." He turned into a hawk and flew toward the southwest. As he rose high in the air, he looked down on the ground. After a while, he saw in the west something that made him think people were living there. Then he began to come down. He came lower and lower, and when near the ground, saw a village. He said to himself, "I will eat up the people who live in that village." He turned into a great bear, and beginning at the first house, he ate up everybody, every person he could find. When he thought he had eaten everybody, he saw, off at the edge of the village, a little hut with smoke rising from it. In the hut, he found a man and woman and several children. He ate them all. "I have finished," said he, and changed himself into a man. He stood around a while, then, seeing a trail, he followed it, but had not gone far when he met a woman who was very handsome. "Where do you live?" asked he. "Over there in the cabin at the edge of the village." "You had better go home with me, for there is no one living there in that cabin. All the people are dead." "I must see first," said the woman. They went back to the village and to the hut where he had found the man, woman, and children. She was the eldest child of the family. Seeing blood on the ground, she began to cry. The man put his hand on the top of her head. That minute, she was senseless. He shook her, and as he shook, she became a gnat. He changed himself into a hawk, and putting the gnat under his wing, flew up and off in the direction of his hut. He got there quickly, then he changed to a man and shook the gnat back to her natural form and size. "This is your home," said he. "You must take care of the meat and the house." One night, while the two were sitting in the hut, the man heard a noise outside as though someone were coming on the run. The door was pushed open and a man came in and said, "I have come to warn you. You have made yourself into two. Nagwahi, the Ancient of Bears, is jealous of you and has said, 'There is a man over there who is very powerful, but I will overpower him and eat him.' Tomorrow The bear will come. You must go east till you reach a high stony hill. When the bear tries to attack you, jump from one rock to another. It will spring after you. When it falls, you may feel safe. This is what I had to tell you. Now I will go. The next morning, the woman saw that her husband was gloomy and sad. What is the matter? Asked she. I am thinking of what will happen to me at midday. The woman had neither seen nor heard the man who spoke to her husband, though she was right there in the hut. He and the man who came to him were so powerful in spirit that they alone heard and saw each other. When it was nearly midday, the man started for the rocks, leaving his wife. He seated himself on the highest rock and waited. Just at midday, he heard a great noise, then another nearer. The third was right at the rock. There was a whoop, and a voice said, I am the strongest of the strong. Nothing can overpower me. It was Niagawaihi, the ancient of bears. The bear leaped onto the rock where the man stood. The man sprang to the next rock, the bear close behind him. In this way, they sprang from one rock to another till the man was tired. As he looked ahead, the next rock looked farther off than the others had been. He made a great effort and just reached it. The bear was right behind him. It sprang, but falling short, hit his jaws on the edge of the rock and went down. The man jumped to the ground. As he struck the ground, he looked back and saw the rock he had just left turn over onto the bear. That is what I said, thought the man. There is nothing that can overpower me. He went back to his hut. He was very happy. One day, when the man and woman were sitting by the fire, they heard somebody approaching the hut. The man opened the door and saw the friend who had twice warned him of danger. The woman saw him too. The man said, Your life is in danger, but I will try and save you. Rub your wife's head with your hands. She will turn to Oshada. Oshada is like the dusty vapor flying on a road in dry weather. Tell her to follow you wherever you go, but she must leave the hut before you do. You will stay here as long as you can, then run directly south. I am going now, but I will come to you again. In the morning, the man rubbed the woman's head and said, Let my wife become a dusty vapor. While he rubbed, she became a vapor on his hand. With his other hand, he brushed the vapor off in the direction it was to go. Then he piled up his meat and said in a loud voice, I give this meat to you, flesh-eating animals that live in the woods. He went southward from the hut to an elm tree that was smooth up to where it branched off. He climbed the tree and sat in the crotch. Soon he began to feel weak, and he thought, There must be something near. He looked everywhere but saw no one. Taking out the meteor tooth, he dampened it with saliva, rubbed his finger over it, then rubbed his eyes and said, Now I can see everything that is going on, even down in the ground. He looked into the earth and saw, deep down, a tree. And on the tree was a monster lizard. He watched it as it climbed slowly up the tree. When it was near the top, the man grew very faint. The lizard was the largest of the ancient blue lizards, Gizagnos goa. It came out of the ground in the heart of the tree and the man was sitting on. The man leaped to another tree. That instant, the lizard was where the man had been sitting, and it called out, "You are smart, but I shall overpower you." It sprang toward the man. The man leaped to another tree, and then from tree to tree, the lizard following. At the edge of a hill was a great rock. The man ran to the rock and from the rock leaped into the air and came down on a mountain far away. He ran directly south along the ridge of the mountain, then went down on the opposite side to a wide valley. He ran across the valley and had begun to climb a second mountain when he heard the lizard coming down the mountain he had just descended on the other side of the valley. It was dark now, but the man continued to ran all night. In the morning, he saw an opening on the other side of which was a low hill and smoke of some kind. He reached the foot of the hill and turning, saw the lizard had just come to the opening. It raised its paw and struck the man's footprint on the trail. That instant, the man fell to the ground. As he fell, his friend was there and said, "Get up. You will die if you fall in this way." He lifted him and pushed him into a run, urging him to hurry. The man felt stronger and again ran fast from valley to valley, the lizard always about the same distance behind. All at once the man fell again. Right away his friend was there. He lifted him to his feet, saying, "Keep up courage," and pushed him into a run. Again he felt stronger and ran faster. It was a very dark night. He ran against a great maple tree. As he hit the tree, he went straight through. This happened many times in the night. Whenever the man hit a tree, he went through it. For 8 days and nights, the lizard chased the man. When it found out that he went through the trees, it threw its power ahead and made the trees so hard that the man could no longer go through them. The 9th night, the lizard commanded a terrible rainstorm to come and the night to be so dark that the man couldn't see where he was going. The man ran till midnight without once hitting a tree. Just at midnight, he hit one and was thrown far back. That moment, his friend was there and said, "Do all you can." And taking hold of his hand, he led him, and they went faster than the man had gone alone. The two ran together till daylight. Then the friend left, and the man went on alone. He began to be very weak. The lizard was coming nearer, and its strokes on the tracks were more frequent. The man fell oftener. The night came, and the lizard made it terribly dark. The man ran against a tree and bounded far back. The lizard was so near that the man fell behind him. The lizard struck the tree and was thrown back also. The man was up and running forward again. The lizard just upon him and was reaching out to seize him when the man fell, as it seemed to him, into a hole in the ground. He thought, well, I am near my end. When I strike, I shall be dashed to pieces. He kept falling, and as he fell, he got sleepy. Looking up, he saw the lizard coming down on the side of the hole, winding around and around. The man fell asleep. After a time, he woke up and was still falling, and the lizard was still pursuing him. At last, the man landed on his feet. He seemed to have come out of the hole. He looked around and saw a beautiful country. My friend told me to go toward the south, thought he, and he ran on in that direction. As the man ran, he knew that the lizard was behind him, coming very fast. Now I shall die, thought he. He closed his eyes and kept on, thinking, I will not see when it reaches me. He ran a long time, then he opened his eyes and looked around. He didn't see the lizard, but he kept running. Soon he came to a house and going in, found an old man. The old man looked up and said, My grandson, I am glad you have come. I've been waiting for you. You are bringing with you what I have wanted to eat. Stand back there. Lizard and I will fight alone. We will see if he is as powerful as he thinks he is. The lizard came to the house and asked, Where is the man I have been chasing? Here I am, answered the old man. You're not the man. I am, but if you think there is another man here, you will not hunt for him till you overpower me. Come outside, said the lizard. There isn't room in there. Very well, said the old man, and getting up, he went outside. Then they began to fight. The lizard tore the old man's flesh. It came together again and healed. The old man tore off lizard's forelegs, but lizard didn't give up. The two fought till lizard was torn to pieces. When the old man convinced himself that the pieces were not alive, he hung them up in the house and called to his grandson, Come out, I have killed the lizard that you were afraid of. I have been wishing for this kind of meat for a long time. The old man boiled some of the meat in a large kettle. In a small kettle, he cooked bear meat for his grandson. While the meat was cooking, he put corn in a pounder, and with a few strokes, it was flour. Then he made bread and began eating. When he had eaten every bit of the great lizard, he said, I thank you, my grandson. This meat will last me for many years. You must stay here till you are rested and cured, for you have been poisoned by the power of the lizard. The old man was the oldest of the flying meteors. One day he said to the man, I want you to see what I have planted. They went a short distance from the cabin to a field where something was growing. This is one's corn, said the old man. There were tall stalks with ears on them as long as the man was tall, and the kernels were as large as a man's head. The old man said, Let us go to the other side of the field. There the man saw a field where different kinds of corn were growing. They went to a third field where something was growing, and the old man said, "These are squashes." They were very large. They passed the squash field and went back to the cabin. The next day, the man said goodbye to his grandfather and started for home. He traveled till he came to a village. He went to the chief's house, and a woman who was there looked at him, then asked, "Have you ever heard of a man who sent his wife away in the form of a vapor?" He thought a little while, then remembered and answered, "I have. I did that myself." "I am your wife," said the woman. The man had had so much trouble that he had forgotten about his wife, but he was glad to find her. They went home together and lived happily. The end. So, how about that for a story, my friends? And let's see if I can get a little bit more light on the subject.
There we go. It was like I lost my cursor. There's somewhere there. Ah, that was good. Anyway, yeah, cool. Eating the lizard. Growing the squash. Quite an adventure.
Yeah, and earlier today, earlier this evening, I pulled cards. And so, we haven't hit our 2 hour mark yet. So, too many cards, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards. So, but I'm getting better at being able to hit the subject and not be too long. So, oh wait, I was going the wrong way. Number one that I pulled was horse upside down. Now, horse is about power, and so horse was one of the first animals that was added to some of the great spirit things, because the native folks did not know about horse until they were brought over by the Spanish and the Europeans. So but to the native folks, it felt like that the horse was an animal that could make you feel like you were flying. So that was the power signal. And stealing horses is stealing power was a statement made frequently in historical Native America, and a reference to the esteemed role which horse played in the native cultures. Horse's physical power and unearthly power. In shamanic practices throughout the world, horse enables shamans to fly through the air and reach heaven. The horse is upside down, and so the contrary. If your ego has gotten in the way, you may have failed to notice the lack of respect you have been receiving from others. You may, on the other hand, be struggling with others to see who is abusing their power. Should I say something? Should I fight my desire to put them in their place? You may be asking. Remember the times in your own life when you have fallen out of grace with the Great Spirit, and then have compassion for brothers and sisters who are now doing the same. They want me to read that again. Remember the times in your own life when you have fallen out of grace with the Great Spirit. Now, not everybody falls out of grace, but the feeling of it. And so remember that if you have, remember compassion for the brothers and sisters who are now doing the same. And there's a lot of that going on. If you are overpowering another or feeling overwhelmed, horse medicine is both the dignified and contrary positions is a simple reminder of how to balance your shield and allowing all pathways to have equal validity. In other words, you might not like somebody else, but they got their, they got their own path in this world. Um, you will see the power and glory of the unified family of humanity. And that's what we need to be working on. The unified family of humanity. This is the gift of the rainbow warrior or warrioress. The eye has no place in the whirling rainbow that comes from the great mystery. So the next one up was Hummingbird Upside Down. 34? 30. Come on now, I know it's back here. Yeah, Hummingbird is joy. And so if contrary Hummingbird is in your cards, it speaks to you of matters of the heart. How or why has your heart center closed? So, are you being overpowered from horse? And, is your heart closed? So it might be that the overpowering of whatever's going on has got you kind of shriveled up, How or why is your heart center closed? Have you done something callous, causing them to shut off love they once felt for you? Maybe. The contrary hummingbird may presage sorrow and the inability to see the many blessings we two-leggeds have been given. So, if it's upside down and hummingbird is joy, that means somehow you've lost joy. You need to go find it again, and the little things will do it. Up is number 14, dog, which is loyalty, I think. 14. I had it open to the page already. Now, this is right side up. Yep, I was right. Dog is loyalty. Dog has been considered the servant of humanity throughout history. If a person carries dog medicine, he or she is usually serving others or humanity in some way. Dog was the servant soldier that guarded the tribe's lodges from surprise attack. Dog is a medicine that embodies the loving gentleness of best friend and the half-wild protector energy of territorial imperative. If dog has been yelled at or paddled, it will still remain loyal to the owner. Dog medicine asks you to look at how readily your sense of loyalty is countermanded by your need for approval. So here's Hummingbird talking about joy. You need to find it. You've lost it somehow. And horse is the power. Have you, is somebody trying to be overpowering to you? Have you lost your power? Which means that is somewhere along the line, I would think that you've lost a little joy in your life. But dog is like loyalty. So be loyal to what? And here is skunk that shows up next. Loyalty to what? And skunk number 7 is all about respect, I believe. Reputation, which is respect. So, skunk medicine, due to its distinctive behavior, humans give this tiny creature, smelly creature, a wide berth. The key word here is respect. Skunk is teaching you that by walking your walk and by respecting yourself, you will create a position of strength. Here's the strength coming out of the with the horse too, right? You will create a position of strength and honored reputation. The carriage of your body relates to others, what you believe about yourself. So, what you believe about yourself. So, somebody, the upside down horse is somebody trying to steal your power, your joy, and dog loyalty. Be loyal to yourself, and um, the carriage of your body relates to others what you believe about yourself. So if you're walking all slouched over and and kind of mousy or whatever, folks gonna look at you that way. So learn to assert without ego what you are. Respect follows. Your self-respectful attitude will repel those who are not of like mind. Skunk medicine people have the ability to attract others and are very charismatic. So, if you've chosen this symbol, you're being asked to notice the kinds of people who are attracted to you. And are they trying to take your power or not? And the last in the list of this is turkey. And what number is that? Turkey is the giveaway. Is it number 9? Oh, no, it's dark over here. Oh, 31. Yep, turkey is the giveaway. So, and it was right side up. Turkey is actually thought to be the giveaway eagle or the eagle of the South for many native peoples. The philosophy of the giveaway was practiced by many tribes. Simply stated, it is the deep and abiding recognition of the sacrifices of both self and others. People in modern day society who have many times more than they need should study the noble turkey. Turkey was the medicine of many saints and mystics. Celebrate if you have turkey medicine. Your virtues are many. You have transcended yourself. So find your joy again with the power of horse, and remember that when you act kind to other people, you build up a reputation like skunk. And when you show your loyalty to others, well, then that just brings the whole picture together. So, my friends, those are the cards for this week. I hope that message does you some good. Don't give up, because even though the first couple cards are upside down, I think overall it is a positive message. Turkey's the giveaway. And, give away what energy you need, but to help other people. And when you understand that, you have the power to gain a reputation with other folks, and that's a good thing. Not a stinky thing.
Yep. Good messages. Good messages.
Not too bad.
Yep. It was all
And we're
good.
still just now under it, just as 2 hours.
We did real good. I want to say thank you to everybody in the chat. Susie Q, F Kitty, Scotty Boy, Richard Red, Chloe's in the house. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Lucky Stone, everybody enjoyed the story. Susie Q, Mary Wins, Elderberry, the whole lot of you. Thank you all for showing up tonight and joining us on our quest off the hook. And let's see who else is here. I think I got most everybody. Sorry if I forget you're here and I didn't see it. But anyway, but thank you all for joining us tonight. Do you got a show tonight?
Yes, sir. I'm going to get up, go tinkle, get something to drink and light a cigarette. And yes, I'll be back.
Sounds great. Sounds great. I got to hit the sack. I got to go to work tomorrow, but thank you for coming on and being here because we sure do enjoy the stories. I enjoy your company and your insight into all my endeavors here. So it's quite the thing. But anyway,
thanks for having me. Thanks for having me as always, Robert. So, everybody keep the faith.
Exactly. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Go catch David on his channel. The link is in the description below. Don't forget to share this out to everybody so they can find out this great information and hear what the cards have to say, because they're pointing out a powerful message to all of us. Don't forget, don't be like horse and don't smell like skunk.
Right.
Go out and do
and
something.
Both of them have power,
They do. Go out, meet your neighbor, be nice, and do something nice for somebody, because that's what it's all about. Do something nice for yourself. Sometimes you got to treat yourself a little bit and enjoy this world. It's beautiful. It's summertime here, and summer's coming right up, and go out and plant the garden. Don't forget to join us on Saturday night for our garden show. And with that, everybody, remember, go out and be the frequency you want to receive, everyone. Love you all. Peace, everybody.